Salutations, everybody. It's your knockoff Hayden Christensen here. I don't know what happened to my hair. I mean, yesterday we had it all tight and well done in honor of the Steam Deck announcement, right? We had to honor our Lord Gabe. But then today I woke up, looked in the mirror and said, holy crap, I look like I want to murder the whole Jedi Council. I don't know what happened, but I guess it doesn't matter, right? Because today we're talking Xbox news. So welcome one, welcome all. We got an exciting roundup today talking about big narrative games, something that I'm worried about in the future, but it looks like Xbox is making a major commitment to them. Not only that, we're talking a controller update, a very important one at that. Looks like we're taking some notes from that DualSense. Last, but certainly not least, game preservation. Your boy's a retro game collector, so hello, this is super important, and Xbox is quite an offender in a very particular way. So we're going to talk about all of that in today's video. So if you're new here, welcome. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Got it. This is it. The ultimate story. I've got it now. Pathetic. I see the script. I see the shoes. You don't have an original bone in your body, and that's why you gotta take writing classes over on Skillshare.
Writing is one of my passions, and if I do say so myself, I think I'm pretty good at it. With that said, it doesn't mean you can't sharpen the pencil a little bit more. So I headed over to Skillshare.com, and I signed up for the Storytelling 101 class with Daniel Jose Alder, who is a New York Times bestselling author. And he touched base with a couple of things that are good for both vets and newcomers, like challenging yourself to write, sitting down and writing, even if you have writer's block, just put some words on paper for an allotted time of 5 to 10 minutes, or that perfectionism will kill you and it's just best to sometimes throw those words at the paper. That type of stuff is a great reminder for people like myself who are constantly writing over and over. So for those of you who are interested in Skillshare, the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare so you can start exploring your creativity today. Link down below. And now let's get comfortable and talk about Xbox. So first things first, Phil Spencer reckons Xbox is building more narrative games than ever before. In a recent interview with The Guardian, Spencer discussed the company's approach to what they defined here as traditional forms of narrative games for Xbox Series X. In other words, games that aren't multiplayer-led, always on, or perhaps live service experiences. Well said. Quote, I think we're probably building more of those now than we've ever been in the history of Xbox, end quote. Spencer explains, quote, platform holders, whether that platform is subscription or a hardware device or a store, are actively investing in new and probably more risky things because if it works, we get value out of bringing players into the ecosystem, which is very true. But more than anything, Xbox is the king of giving you that multiplayer and that single player, and a lot of people just want one heavily narrative-driven experience. And now when you look into that slate of games in 2023, you know, the year that all Xbox fans have been waiting for, all the players have put their chips on the table saying, hey, when the games start coming, it's gonna be great. We better hope they are, right? Because now we're seeing a commitment that they are mostly narrative-focused. So, of course, we know things like Starfield are going to be single-player only. Well, Bethesda promised as much many years before even Xbox stepped into the picture. But things like Avowed, hopefully Compulsion Games next title, Fable even. I remember there were rumors for a while and they went away that Fable was going to be online or co-op. We don't know how that's going to end up. But yes, it looks like Xbox is digging deep on their narrative games. And while you may be sitting here going, oh, who cares? As I see more and more companies with their Assassin's Creed Infinities and their GTA 6 evolving maps, and even to some extent Halo Infinite creating these platforms to which you can launch games off of the platform, and you see traditional games sort of shrinking down in how they once were. I mean, I just can't get excited as much about that as a brand new single player game. And I worry about with all these evolving mechanics, evolving maps and everything, that we will lose what is truly a single player game as time goes on. So to hear that Xbox is working on your standard narrative games is great news for yours truly and many others out there, because I am, like I said, a little concerned on where that slippery slope ends up, because there's a lot of money to be made there, and I'm not stupid about that. We know that, of course, single-player games eventually end, and that, to me, is the draw for them, that someone can play it and complete it and not feel like they got FOMO because they haven't played the latest event from 2 weeks ago or whatever. I think that single-player games serve a very particular purpose that once they go missing, if they ever did, people would be in big trouble. Monetization, of course, is important, whether we want to admit it or not. These companies need to make money so they can invest further, maybe in a big single-player game. But I do see the known potential in these platform titles. You know, getting a little monetization model in there. I think that, yeah, if you can get some bite-sized 5 to 15 hour pieces in there, I can see how that would be an attractive thing for someone who wants to stay invested in one particular IP. But for me, as long as that doesn't impact what we're hearing Xbox is working on, traditional single-player games, kind of like what PlayStation does, good, right? Do your Ghost of Tsushima multiplayer add-on afterwards, for example. Give me the single-player now. So that was really good to see personally. But Phil Spencer was gabbing all week, man. He was making appearances everywhere, and he jumped on the Kinda Funny Games cast to have a chat with their staff where he talked about a new controller, maybe? The article is titled, Phil Spencer compliments DualSense and suggests Xbox could update its controller. Speaking as part of the latest Kinda Funny Games cast, Spencer said that Xbox probably won't release any major bespoke accessories such as VR headsets in the near future, but suggested that an updated controller was far more likely to happen. Quote, we're definitely thinking about different kinds of devices that can bring more games to more places. There's probably some work that we'll do on the controller. I think Sony's done a nice job with their controller, and we kind of look at some of that and think there are things that we should go do. If you don't remember, earlier on this year, there was a survey by Microsoft, and one of the things they asked was about the PlayStation DualSense. They were checking in and seeing how Xbox fans felt about it from an ergonomic standpoint, just the feeling of holding the controller in your hands. I like the Xbox controller much more, and that really started with the Xbox One. The PlayStation 4 controller now, that DualShock feels worse than it ever has since we've moved into a universe where we have a great Series X controller, which mildly changes some things up, and then you have the DualSense, which was a major evolution, mostly in comfort. I mean, it's really hard to go back to some of PlayStation's older controllers. So a tip of the cap to them. They've done a phenomenal job evolving that experience. But not only that, it's what the DualSense is capable of. All those vibrations across the controller that can create rain, or I remember hearing an example with Plague Tale Innocence, available free on PS Plus and in Game Pass, but how when you start getting close to the rats, you start to feel them crawling around the inside of the controller. And then there's adaptive triggers, haptic feedback. There's so much there that adds to the experience, and we're seeing third parties support it, right? We're seeing something like Resident Evil 8 come in and have adaptive triggers there because they believe it adds something to the experience. And if we continue to see third-party support for it, then I think Xbox is more likely to say, let's invest in a controller, let's get it out there, and people will support our controller with the same features as the DualSense. Not only that, but it evolves how some games feel and how you react to certain things. There's some I haven't experienced, like Returnal is one of them, and there are absolutely instances, in my opinion, where DualSense underwhelms. I think of, well, funny enough, I brought it up, but Resident Evil 8, its adaptive triggers just felt sticky and like you were fighting with them. Same thing, funny enough, with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. It was just like it just didn't feel great to use. But there are instances where if it's like slowly pulling back a bow, or as I mentioned, the raindrops, of course, Astrobot as an entire game being a showcase of the controller, there is a lot of potential there where I feel like if both parties are invested on a technical front with similar feature sets, we could really see this take off and evolve our gameplay experiences. So I think it's smart that Xbox is getting in there. The only issue is, unlike PlayStation, Xbox now has to convince consumers, you got to go out and buy these now. And that could be a little bit tough, but if we know developers are supporting it, then there is that as well. But for me, I've always preferred the feel of the Xbox controller in my hands, mostly because I learned that at the start of this generation, I had a thumb strain. It was really weird. And I actually couldn't use PlayStation controllers because there's probably a 0.5 millimeter reach you got to do with their controllers because you're going into the middle, whereas Xbox is more vertically aligned with both its thumbsticks. And also, there's probably a hair of support on the outside that just supported my thumb, where I went, ergonomically, I'm more impressed with Xbox right now because they helped me get rid of an injury. I mean, I was able to play games on an injury. So that was something that was pretty wild to see. But beyond that, feature-wise, very, very excited to see Xbox get involved in that because I think they need to. I think this was something they sort of missed out on. It doesn't seem like a fad similar to Kinect, where you get in late on that and then you package it in with the Xbox One. It's like, oh, look, isn't this what you wanted? No. This is something that can improve even the general gamers experience. So it's easily accessible. It's a part of something that people are familiar with. I think there's just so many reasons why they should do it. So I'm excited to see what they do with it and if they try to evolve any of the ideas. But I think what they should do is just try to stay competitive. That'd be great. And keep it as a customizable option with the Xbox controller lab. And we'll see where it goes from there. All right. Last bit of news. Very much important, though. Xbox's Phil Spencer voices concern on the state of game preservation. He says, I do worry a little bit about losing our art form in the history of it, once again, on the Kind of Funny Games cast. When I think about old ROMs and MAME and these things of where these old games are going to go as the hardware that's capable of running those games, I really wish as an industry we'd come together to help preserve the history of what gaming is about so we don't lose the ability to go back, which he then states that what they're doing with cloud is part of preserving that history. I do believe the ultimate preservation of your history is being able to take that disc from all those years ago and whoop, throw it in the console and it works. To me, that would be it. Not through the cloud where things can change digitally and you just never know because you're not holding the physical thing there and people just don't trust it. At least now they don't. What's funny about this, really more than anything to me, is you look at the DRM issues that were really plaguing Xbox above all other companies and how there was a ongoing C-bomb issue with PlayStation's hardware. That's mostly been settled down because a simple firmware update can actually fix that because it's tied to a trophy with an internal clock. It's really weird. But long story short is PlayStation has the ability to sidestep this, whereas Xbox is currently in an area where their online DRM checking for the first time with Xbox games and its demand to be connected to the internet at least once upon setup is holding it back from true preservation, because essentially what happens is those games are worthless on your Series X if you toss them into the console and you're not online for that first time. So that's something definitely worth considering when Phil is saying, well, I wish we could come together and figure this out. It's like, dude, no offense, but let's take care of our own home here first before we start calling for unison. I think that they're doing a great job making games more accessible. One of my prime go-tos is Fable 2 on PC, right? That's something that was never a thing, but now you can stream a 360 game to your PC, and there's something really cool there about keeping the history of a game while also being able to access it. So there's that blending there, and he is right that xCloud is helping on that front. But I don't think until they solve this that we can unify and get everyone in caring about it. And right now, Nintendo's doing probably the best job with a modern console, not locking you out if you're offline, outside of course, instances where games need to complete a download. But beyond that, nothing new on the Xbox front. So it's been an overall chatty week for Phil Spencer, and it's been a very interesting up and down news week. You know, it starts off, and I think this week's gonna be dead as hell too. And then suddenly we get a Steam Deck, and then we get all these Phil Spencer interviews, and then the weekend hits. So here we are. Hope you all enjoyed. Looking forward to seeing your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know what you're thinking. And until then, I'll talk with all of you very soon. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.